Hi everybody, this is something I've been wanting to try to do for a long time, and it's not easy. And even now, as I painstakingly try to rack my brain to think about what order to make these in, it still hasn't been easy. And that's to try to list what I feel, in my opinion, are the 10 best Beatles solo albums of all four members of the band. Okay? Now, as I say, this is nearly impossible for me. And basically, this list is going to be my feeling, just my opinion, and it's only based on how I feel right now, today, this particular date, July the 10th, 2016. It could change tomorrow, but generally very little. Also, although these are my personal choices, I'm also trying to be a little objective in the sense that I'm trying to see why I'd put another album in a place above or below a certain album. Going through them right now here, before I start, making sure that I have them kind of the way I want to do it. Okay, here goes. Let's get right to it, and I look forward to everyone's comments on here. This is, like I said, it's hard to do. Make a few comments for each album. I'll start out with number 10. This is going to surprise a lot of people. Number 10 is Paul McCartney's most recent studio album from 2013 called New. I know. How could it be? How could it be that Paul McCartney, the former Beatle, the guy who had wings in the 1970s and hasn't done anything good since the 1970s in a lot of people's minds, how could he have anything good past 1977 or so, or 1978? How could that be? Didn't he have nothing any good? Baloney. Okay? I love this album, New. I know a lot of people do. I know a lot of people don't. I know people who think that there's nothing good on here, but I really like this album so much to the point where it is easily among the top 5 rankings of Paul's work. For me, all I can say is it sounds fresh, it sounds vital, so many different styles, different producers, and at first when I heard the title New, I thought, like a lot of people thought, what kind of silly title is that for an album? It's Paul's new album? Okay, that's okay now, but what about when the album isn't new anymore? Well, I think the title New doesn't just mean that it's Paul's latest album. I think the title New also refers to the feeling about a new relationship, new wife, an older man kind of like feeling young and fresh at the start again, as if his life has been rejuvenated. That's the feeling that I get from this album, and I think it comes across great. Newfound love, moving on, getting over your past disappointments and heartaches and stuff that Paul endured with the death of his first wife, Linda, and it's like brand new all over again. So it's a well-titled album, and for me, truly a joy, and I put it at number 10 at this point. Okay, album number 9. Okay, everybody out there, anybody who kind of like was raising their eyebrows a little suspiciously at that, you could raise your eyebrows suspiciously at this one too for number 9. We have another Paul McCartney album, and guess what? It's another album that's not from the 1970s. It's not a Wings album. But surely Paul doesn't have anything good this late. I really think this is a fine album. A lot of people say it's very close to his work with the Beatles, kind of Beatlish in a lot of ways, and I'm inclined to agree, although not 100% Beatley, but there's a lot of good material on here. It's an album from 1997. I think, probably Paul's finest in the 90s, as I just think quickly off the top of my head. What can I say here? Just good. There's a lot of good songs on it, is what it comes down to. And I always say there's songs on this album that seem good enough to have been on Beatles albums like the White Album or Revolver. I think Paul's got some great stuff here. Calico Skies, Song We Were Singing, Some Days, Little Willow, Beautiful Night with Ringo guest starring on it. It goes on. The World Tonight, which was to me a really good single that Paul got gypped of a hit with. So there's a lot of those too, not just that one, or a lot of other ones that I think Paul got gypped on other albums. That's number 9. Number 8. Where was I going to put this album? Where was I going to put it? It's hard to decide exactly what album tops another, what makes one album junior to another, senior to another. Well, number 8, I went with George Harrison's CloudNine. Again, notice so far these albums we're talking about are past the 70s, not the 60s, not the 70s. We got the 80s, 90s, and 2000s here we got. Okay, 1987, George had a big hit with Got My Mind Set on You, which was a cover song, but what a comeback album this is with George Harrison. Consistently all the way through, George's voice to me has never sounded better on this album, and just good stuff, good production by Jeff Lynne. Some people don't like it, think it sounds too 80s. Well, duh, of course it sounds 80s. It was a 1980s album. What's it going to sound like, a 60s or 90s or 70s? I mean, really, you know, I just think it's a good material consistently all the way through here. It's one of George's best albums. So there you go. That's number 8. Now number 7. We get back to Paul McCartney, Paul and Wings, Venus and Mars. I love this album. Again, what can I say? Good vintage Wings, a solid Paul McCartney and the band all the way through. One of my favorite Wings albums. You know, really, again, really hard to put these in the kind of order that they should go in. But you know, this is a shot at trying. So I got that at number 7, Venus and Mars. Okay, let's see, number 6. Okay, now number 5 and 6. I mean, how do you, with a video like this, should I have mixed these two up in different orders and reversed them? Because we're getting a lot of Paul McCartney here, you know, and it's Paul's taking over this in a way, right? I'm going to put Band on the Run at number 6. A lot of people are going to gasp at that. How in the world? Because Band on the Run is considered by a lot of people Paul's best album, maybe one of Paul's best albums. There's no doubt about that. It is, if I was ranking Paul on his own, which I have in the past videos if you want to look back. There's a plug for past videos. It's a very good album. It's a return to form. This really put Paul on the map, if you will, in the commercial charts and everything, with a lot of good songs. And the American version, like I said, I do not accept this album without Helen Wheels on it. I know I'm from the US, and Helen Wheels belongs on here in my view. I know Paul didn't want it, and the UK people don't want it. But, you know, it's one of Paul's best albums, Band on the Run. It would be higher if not trying to squeeze everybody in there. So I have Band on the Run at number 6. Now here's the album that I was going to originally put at 6, and then Band on the Run would have been 5, because we're down to the top 5 albums. And I wasn't sure about this. I'll explain as I go along, because I wanted to make sure that Ringo Starr had his album in the top 5. The Ringo album from 1973. Now, how in the world is the Ringo album better than Band on the Run? Who's to say it is or it isn't? But I just played this again recently all the way through, and you really got to give it to Ringo. But he's got 3 big hits on here. What? I mean, you have You're 16, you have Photograph, you have Oh My My. He had 3 hits on this. But of course, if you look at it in the sense that this is probably the closest the Beatles ever came to having a reunion, in a way it's like a Beatles album. So don't, for people that say, gasping, how could you put Ringo in the top 5 at number 5? Well, it's really Ringo with Paul, with John, and with George working on different tracks and here and there and all coming together. Ringo always with a little help from his friends. It's such an entertaining, lighthearted, fun, good album, and you got other people on here too contributing, God knows. I mean, there's too many. Look at my Ringo review of this album and you'll see them all. There's a lot of guest stars on here, and yet it's still a Ringo album. But this is far and away Ringo's best album. I still don't think it's been beaten, although I think Ringo's come, well, I wanted to say come close. Sometimes you just say things that seem to flow, but you don't really literally. I don't mean come close, but he's done very well in the years in the 90s and even in the 2000s. I thought there was a couple of good albums, but I still think this is his best, and I think it deserves to be near the top. You know, just because it's Ringo, you don't say, hey, you know, it's Ringo. He automatically gets short shrifted. That's number 5. Now we're into the top 4. Really hard to do. Really hard to do. Finally, John Lennon. makes an appearance with the Imagine album at number 4. Now, you know, I feel, I must say, it's very unfortunate that poor John was murdered. I didn't really want to let the party down with that, but he didn't live long enough to really give us more nice work, and excuse me, for us to really gauge what he might have done. So I got this at number 4. Imagine it's just, I think it's great all the way through. You know, a lot of people quibble with Oh Yoko. I think it's a delightful song. People quibble with I Don't Want to Be a Soldier. You know, if the song I Don't Want to Be a Soldier was anywhere else other than at the end of side 1, I would say it would be difficult to sit through. But I like it within the context of the whole album. You know, a lot of people don't like the song How Do You Sleep. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of comments on that at Dig It Paul. An answer to Paul, John felt he was being attacked by Paul in a feud on his Ram album. So here's what was the problem with John, because I got 2 John albums back to back. Number 3, I put John Lennon Plastic Ono Band, the debut studio album from John. A masterpiece, you know. In some ways, this could be the best solo Beatles album, but the only reason that I wouldn't put it at number 1 or even number 2 is because, although it's a masterpiece, although it really gets at the gut of John's pain and his suffering, it is a downer. It is a depressing album. You can't listen to it all the time. It's a great work of art in that regard. It really lets John show everything, show all his warts, all the uncomfortable feelings he had, etc., etc. But that's why I kind of took it down a few notches to number 3, because and I gave the, you know, I do give it the nod over Imagine, though. I was almost going to put Imagine higher up in this place, which revolve the places around, but I said no. I got to kind of feel that even though this is more of a unhappy type of feeling to this album, it is artistically more relevant and important maybe than Imagine, which is why I put them in the order that I did. Now we go to number 2, and I think anybody who's a real solo Beatles enthusiast will know kind of like what you'd expect to be lingering, maybe which order. Okay, I'm kind of surprised that I did it this way, but number 2, I've got Paul's Ram album. Now, these days, this album is enjoying quite a, I don't know what you call it, what's the word? Just getting acclaim, getting some overdue praise, and now it's really getting loved by everybody, fans and critics alike, and myself too. I think this is a fantastic Paul album. I haven't done an official review on this yet, but you can have a hint now of where I feel regarding this album. You know, I know there's people out there, Mike Bass in particular, you know, a little shout out to you. Keep saying in the comments, please do your Ram review, will you? And there's not much I can say that hasn't been said already, which is one of the reasons why I don't do it, and I want to do it justice. But this album is just homespun magic from Paul. Again, different styles, different feelings. Don't want to lay all my cards on the table. Want to save that for when I do the actual Ram review one of these days. But it's come a long way, this album, in people's estimations now. Most people, it could even be number 1 on certain days. But I'll put it number 2. I think it's right now Paul's best album. And why do I put it at number 2? And why is the next one number 1? Well, it's an album that I have not given a proper review on my channel to yet. It's George Harrison, All Things Must Pass. I put number 1. Now why is it number 1? I'm going to say something which I don't think I've really said in public, although some people may have been able to feel it out. If I love all 4 Beatles as a fan, but if I was going to list the Beatles in my order of favorite to least favorite, George has always been my least favorite of the Beatles, and I can get into that another time. But again, this is where the objectivity comes in. Being objective, this is a monster album. Now, the first thing is because it's 3 discs. And I'm not, you know, nothing really to say right now about the Apple Jam. We'll forget about that. But the other albums that are in here, pretty damn amazing, you know. And what I think is important is George was always thought of as, you know, lesser than Lennon and McCartney. And I don't want to start any kind of bickering here among fans. In some ways, I can see why people would say that. I think he was a little less of a writer than John and Paul, but he was able to show them and show the world with this album what he was able to accomplish. And he really had like a floodgates of material. I'm going to say from like 68 through 70 was arguably his peak, where he really went crazy, and just all these songs that he had, and this creativity within him came out and produced a really solid classic album. And again, I'm not going to go through too many specifics with what I like about the album. I'll save it for whenever I do the review. But it's kind of, I think, quite an effort for me, and something to think about. The fact that I overstepped John and Paul and went with George for this album. I think the man really deserves it, because of how he was able to show what he could do. Oh, we still got the trains over here I'm battling. Sorry, folks. It's a noisy evening. But it's pretty amazing to think about that he could actually do that. Yeah, we expected greatness from John and Paul. Did we expect this much greatness from George? I mean, really? You know, for that reason alone, I have to put, I could have easily put, you know, Ram, followed by, most people would say, yeah, Ram and Plastic Ono Band, and, you know, 1 and 2, and then maybe, you know, Band on the Run, this one, you know. Anyway, that's my order for today. Tune in next week, maybe it'll be different. But I hope you had some fun with this, and I'm curious to see what people think. Keep those comments coming, and let's get to it. Thanks, everybody.